Howdy young'uns, Silvermongoose back again for another buyer's guide / review for you guys. Now the console that I'm reviewing today is actually a handheld console, and this year is its 20th anniversary. I'm talking about the original Game Boy. Now, the original Game Boy was not really the first handheld console released. I thought it was whenever I was younger. The first one was actually the Microvision, which was released in 1979, and this one wasn't released till 10 years later in 1989, and it was released in Japan and North America in the same year, in 1989. It was created by Gunpei Yokoi and Nintendo's R&D 1, which were the same guys that had designed the Game & Watch series, and they also produced a lot of popular games for the NES, such as Metroid, Dr. Mario, and Kid Icarus. Now whenever this thing was launched in Japan, it was launched with Super Mario Land, Baseball, Yakuman, and Alleyway. The big difference between the North American and Japanese launches is whenever this was launched in North America, it was packaged with Tetris, which it was a huge deal back then. I mean, Tetris was a wildly popular game, and there's actually an interesting story about the Tetris, which I will get to whenever I start talking about the games. And this thing was so popular that in the first couple weeks that it was on sale in North America, it sold its entire shipment of 1 million Game Boys, and the demand was actually double that. People were looking for Game Boys left and right. And in the Game Boy's lifetime, it went up against the Atari Lynx, the Turbo Express, and more popularly, the Sega Game Gear, which all were way more like technologically advanced. They had color screens, and the screens were backlit, and they had lots more features and stuff. So why did the Game Boy become, the successful handheld it is today? Well, price range was a big thing. Whenever the Game Boy first came out, it would cost you about $100. Now if you compare this to the other prices like the Turbo Express, which was $250, and the Sega Game Gear, which was $150, the Game Boy started to look pretty good. Also, this Game Boy takes 4 batteries, and it has about 10 to 35 hours of battery life. And the Game Gear and the Lynx use 6 batteries, and they have a complete max of only 5 hours of battery life. Only 5 for 6 batteries. And also, you have to keep in mind that in 1989, rechargeable batteries weren't really popular. Even in the early 90s, they weren't even really that popular. So in the end, the battery efficiency, the Nintendo label, the lower price range, and extremely popular games like Tetris and Pokemon led to over 118 million Game Boys and Game Boy Colors being sold. Now I don't actually know the number of just original Game Boys that were sold, but if you compare the 118 million to the less than 500,000 Lynxes that were sold, and the 11 million Game Gears that were sold, it's pretty clear who's the winner, no matter how many original Game Boys were sold. So that's really the history behind it, the short history. Now we'll get to the hardware. A lot of people say that this thing is huge. It's not really that big. These people were the kinds of people that have never seen a Lynx or a Game Gear. Like, those things are actually way bigger than this. And now I actually think that this thing is actually pretty good size for my hands. Like, it's not too massive. It's not really heavy. Like, most of the weight is from the batteries. Excuse me. And it is built so solid. Like, my little brother once took this and threw it as hard as he could against the concrete because he was just completely teed off that he lost or something like that. And this little screen actually popped off. Just glued it back on, worked perfectly fine. Just with glue. Like, that part, we didn't even need it, but we glued it on anyways. People have, like, dropped these downstairs, thrown them off of buildings. There was actually a Game Boy that was in barracks that were bombed during the Gulf War. And the thing is, like, all, like, charred and melted, and it was bombed, and it still works. It's actually on display at the Nintendo World Store. Just click on the link and you'll be able to see a little video on it. So I would venture to say that this thing is probably the most solid console probably ever built. home and handheld. Like, this thing is completely, like, just, it is solid. Like, even the controls here, these controls here, you have your D-pad and your A and B and your start and select. These controls are really solid. They work just as well as they did when I first got this thing. What else can I say about this? Well, you can see, you know, the screen on there. It's kind of green and darker green, but you can change that with the contrast on the sides. On the side there, you have a mono sound coming out there. It's really, really loud. I'll just turn it on there so you guys can hear it. And it's actually, it's really loud. If you go on the bottom there, there's a phone jack, so you can wear it on headphones, and that actually has stereo sound. If you look on the top, that's just the on and off switch. Here is where you put your games, and you should usually leave a game in there just so you don't get dust and stuff in there, because there's nothing covering it. Also in the back, this is where you have your 4 batteries, but you won't be changing them that often. Here is where you can have your AC adapter if you were just playing at home and you don't want to use batteries. If you are using AC adapter, it should have 6 volts and at least 250 milliamps. I just grabbed something like this like 10 years ago, and it's just one of the ones that have multiple voltages on them, and it's pretty easy to find something that has multiple voltages or even 6 volts. It has the contrast here, so you can make the screen darker or not. And here is where you have your volume, and here's also where you have your link cable, so you can play head-to-head against people. And if you look at games like this here, you can see above my finger there's like a little black and red symbol that'll actually say that you can play with multiple people. So you can use a link cable for that. Here's the battery light. It'll always be red. It won't turn red or green or anything. It'll always be red, but it'll just get fainter and fainter as your batteries get fainter as well. So I think that's pretty much all I can really say about the hardware for it, other than it's a brick. It'll last you your whole life. It's really solid, nice and loud. The controls they're really solid. They're perfectly fine. The real downside of the Game Boy is the screen here. You can actually see it pretty well right now, which is surprising. You have to be in a pretty well-lit room, or even if you're outside, you're going to kind of be shifting around a bit just to get it to work well. But if you get in a good spot, it can provide a good experience. So I'll see you guys back in part 2, because I don't want to make this run too long, where I'll talk about the games, a couple of accessories, and what can you expect to pay for this. See you guys in part 2.